Over the top? No, we had no over the top rules. We were totally reasonable, thoughtful parents who made solid decisions at every turn.
In 1973, Harrison Ford and Paul Lamont did something to Ron Howard that haunts him today. They threw bottles at his car and locked him in a trailer, calling it Opie shaming. But that was just the beginning. For 50 years, Howard stayed quiet about the dark side of Hollywood. Now he's revealing everything. The accidents that nearly killed actors on his sets. The lawsuits that cost millions. The family secrets that almost tore his marriage apart. America's favorite director finally admits the truth about his painful journey. Ron Howard was born on March 1, 1954 in a small town called Duncan, Oklahoma. His dad, Rance, was trying to make it as an actor and writer. His mom, Jean, was also an actress. They didn't have much money. In fact, things were really tough. But in 1958, when Ron was just 4 years old, they packed everything they owned and moved to Hollywood. They were chasing a dream, hoping that both of them could get better acting jobs. It was risky. They had no guarantees. They ended up in a tiny home in Burbank trying to stay afloat while raising their little red-haired boy. The strange part was they lived close to a major studio. So, young Ron grew up seeing actors, cameras, and film sets almost every day. He didn't go to a normal preschool. Instead, he was taught on movie sets, watching everything and slowly becoming part of that world, even though no one had planned for it. That big move to California didn't just change where they lived, it quietly changed their whole future. On January 1, 1956, when Ron was just 18 months old, he appeared in a movie called Frontier Woman. It wasn't planned. His father needed a baby for one short scene and decided to use Ron. That tiny moment, just a baby crawling across a set, was the start of something huge. His parents were still struggling financially, especially because his dad had only just left the Air Force. By July 15, 1956, Ron was even performing live in a theater play. But even as he appeared more, his parents didn't want him to be treated like other child stars. They refused to sign any long-term contracts until he turned 5. That decision nearly destroyed them financially. In 1957, they were so broke that Rance thought about quitting acting and moving back to Oklahoma to be a farmer. But they stayed, barely hanging on, believing they were doing the right thing for their son. Starting in 1954, Ron's parents made one rule very clear: no full-time acting until he was at least 5. That meant turning down big offers in 1957 and 1958, even when they couldn't afford rent. They had to pawn things just to keep going. By the end of 1958, they were seriously thinking about leaving Hollywood, but they didn't. In 1959, Ron turned 5 and things slowly started changing. That year he was cast in a movie called The Journey. And for the first time, his name appeared in the credits, but it wasn't all happy. On set, other crew members made fun of his red hair and freckles. They called him names like freckle-faced freak. It broke his heart. His dad, who was also working on the set, got into an argument with one of the crew and almost lost his job. The job only paid $12,500, but it meant everything to them. That same year, his younger brother, Clint, was born on April 20th. Money was still tight. Their debt reached the modern-day value of about $5,000, but his parents stayed firm on protecting Ron. They kept him in public school. They let him be a kid as much as they could, even as the pressure grew. Then in 1960, something huge happened. Ron landed the role of Opie Taylor in the Andy Griffith Show. He was just 6 years old. The casting process was long and hard. More than 300 kids auditioned, but Ron's natural charm stood out. The show began airing on October 3, 1960, and it became a hit. It ran for 249 episodes, and Ron was in 243 of them. At the start, he was paid $300 per episode. By the time the show ended in 1968, he was making $1,000 an episode. But with that success came a lot of pressure. He was still only a child, yet he had to memorize lines, show up on time, and perform perfectly. There was no live audience, so every joke and scene had to be delivered with exact timing. It wasn't easy, but he learned fast. The show felt like it took place in a simpler time, and Ron's character made people feel safe and warm. That's why viewers loved him. But behind the scenes, he was growing up fast. Ron and Andy Griffith, the star of the show, became very close. Andy was more than just a co-star. He acted like a mentor. He would explain scenes to Ron and tell him stories between takes. Their bond started when Ron was just 6, and it grew stronger over time. But things weren't always calm. Andy struggled with drinking, and sometimes Ron saw him get into angry arguments on set. It was scary. In one case, Andy read a bad review out loud and became upset in front of everyone. Despite all this, he was still kind to Ron, helping him with emotional scenes and treating him with respect. Years later, in 1997, Andy even visited Ron on a movie set in Queens. They didn't find out until after Andy died in 2012 that they were actually distant cousins. It was a shocking and sweet discovery that made their long bond feel even more special. In 1962, during a scene on a lake, 8-year-old Ron nearly drowned. They were filming a fishing scene on a small boat when something went wrong. The boat tipped and Ron fell into the water. Andy Griffith saw it happen and jumped in without a second thought. He pulled Ron out. The producers didn't want anyone to know because it could damage the show's reputation, so it stayed quiet. But Ron never forgot it. There were no safety rules back then. Kids could work long hours, and accidents weren't uncommon. That near drowning left a mark on Ron. And years later, when he started directing films, he made sure every set had safety plans in place. By 1968, when the Andy Griffith show ended, Ron was 14. But instead of getting more roles, he got rejected. Over 50 auditions in 1968 and 1969 went nowhere. Everyone still saw him as Opie. He felt trapped. He told his parents he wanted to quit. He took small roles like Gentle Ben in 1969 for just $500 per episode, far less than what he used to earn. In 1970, he lost the lead in The Wild Country. Things kept getting worse. He joined the Smith family in 1971, earning $8,000 for 39 episodes. But the show flopped. All this rejection gave him anxiety, which he hid from others. At the same time, he was playing basketball in high school, averaging 12 points per game. In 1972, he tried to live a normal teen life, but inside he felt stuck. In 1973, things changed again. Ron was 19 and got cast in American Graffiti. It was directed by George Lucas. Filming started in June in California. On the outside, it looked exciting, but behind the scenes, things were rough. Co-stars Harrison Ford and Paul Lamat bullied him. On July 15, they threw beer bottles near his car and yelled at him to dance, Opie, dance. They locked him in a trailer on July 20, making him miss rehearsals. They even spiked his drinks. All of it was because he had been a child star, and they didn't respect that. Ron stayed quiet. He later called it his only moment of Opie shaming. Despite everything, he made it through and earned $10,000. Years later, Ford apologized. But the pain stuck with him. Back in 1970, Ron had met Cheryl Alley in high school. Their first date was on November 1st, and by December, a rumor spread that Cheryl was pregnant. They were just 16. The gossip exploded. In January 1971, Ron denied it in the school newspaper. In February, tabloids picked it up. He lost a TV guest role worth $2,000. Because of it. Cheryl was devastated, but they stayed together. Ron proposed 3 times. She finally said yes in October 1974. They got married on June 7, 1975. They've now been together for 50 years. Ron often calls her his good luck charm. Money was still a problem after Andy Griffith. In January 1971, Ron started delivering newspapers. He made $150 a month and delivered $200 papers before school each day. He needed money to take Cheryl out. But on April 5, 1971, he was rear-ended by a truck while driving to an audition. He got whiplash and had to delay his next role. Medical bills hit $3,000 holders. He didn't have insurance. He even sold his bike for $200. The pain stayed for years and affected how he moved during later film scenes. Even after American Graffiti became a massive hit in 1973, Ron didn't make what he deserved. The film made $115 million in the US on a tiny $777,000 budget, but Ron only got a flat $10,000. No share of the profits. He asked George Lucas for 1% worth over $1 million. Lucas said no. It hurt their friendship. Ron had to take a job on Happy Days in 1974 for $1,000 per episode just to have steady income. That show helped his career again and led him to directing. Back in January 1974, Ron Howard was just 19 when he started playing Richie Cunningham on a brand new TV show called Happy Days. The very first episode aired on January 15th and pulled in 11 million viewers. At first, the show focused on Richie's teenage life in 1950s Milwaukee. But by 1976, everything started to change. Fonzie, played by Henry Winkler, became the breakout star. Suddenly, ratings exploded. The show jumped to number 1, reaching 31 million viewers every single week. That same year, ABC executives came up with a new plan. They wanted to rename the show Fonz Happy Days to cash in on Fonz' rising fame. In 1976 alone, Bonsi merchandise made over $1 million. But Ron Howard wasn't okay with it. He had been the star since the beginning, and now he was being pushed to the side. In November 1976, he gave the producers an ultimatum. If they changed the title, he would quit. Even though his contract lasted until 1980, he was ready to walk away. Everything nearly fell apart. But then the news leaked to Variety magazine on December 5th and fans were furious. More than 10,000 letters poured into ABC. People didn't want the heart of the show to be lost. ABC gave in. They kept the original title and Howard stayed. But something had changed forever. By 1977, the show was making $50 million a year. Yet Howard was earning only $25,000 per episode while Winkler was pulling in $75,000. Howard later said in a 1980 interview that this moment was a turning point. It pushed him to think more about directing. Things on set weren't peaceful either. Around 1976 and 1977, when the show was at its peak, the cast started fighting over money and screen time. Anson Williams, who played Potsy, was making $12,000 per episode. That was half of what Ron Howard earned. He was frustrated and jealous. On November 16, 1976, during the filming of an episode called The Muckrakers, Williams reportedly stormed off the set. Gary Marshall, the show's creator, had rewritten a scene to favor Howard. Some thought it was favoritism. There were rumors of a physical fight, but nothing was ever proven. ABC tried to keep it quiet to protect their $50 million machine. Years later, in 2012, things got even messier. Williams and other cast members sued CBS for $10 million in unpaid royalties. They claim they never got their share from all the merchandise. Just in 1976, over 5 million Happy Days lunch boxes were sold. The case was settled on April 4, 2012. Each of them received only $65,000. Williams said he never even made $100,000 a year, while the studios made millions. Howard wasn't part of the lawsuit, but in a 2025 interview, he admitted those moments almost ruined friendships. While still acting on Happy Days, Howard quietly made his first short film in early 1975. It was called Deed of Daring Do, just 10 minutes long. He shot it during a 2-week break in March using only $2,000. Even Henry Winkler made a cameo. The film premiered at a small festival on June 15, 1975. There were rumors someone accused him of plagiarism, but nothing was ever proven. Back then, copyright laws were unclear. In fact, a fanfic lawsuit in 1976 forced other creators to settle for up to $5,000, but nothing tied to Howard. What really shook him was when producer Roger Corman asked for reshoots on April 20, 1975. It cost him an extra $500, almost